Ready.
Hello and welcome to In the Light, Growing Your Soul with me, Anna Isabel, and I am a clinical hypnotherapist. Today, I have two guests with me. I have Timothy and Johanna Dowdle, who have written a book called I Ching, the I Ching Oracle. So I am curious because this is an aspect of divination of which I know very, very little. So I think I'm just going to ask the two of you to introduce us to what it is.
Okay, well, I can start if you like. The I Ching is a system of divination that uses a series of 64 hexagrams. When one hexagram changes into another, you see a situation in a process of change, and you see the result in the following situation. So I Ching is a form of divination that's used to study situations and then see the outcome, the result of whatever situation is changing. That's the basics of it.
And when I was reading your book, so you use two techniques initially, and one of two. You can either use sticks or you can use coins. And that made me think about other ancient divination techniques that are used in shamanism, etc., like the throwing of the dice and throwing of bones, etc. So how did this evolve? Because I think it must be very ancient.
Well, I think it's because you have to use a random method to access the subconscious. The conscious mind, the rational mind, can't enter. So the oracle is the link. So if you use a random method, then the rational mind is not interfering or trying to control it. It is a method that's used to open the door into the subconscious, and the oracle, in the case of the I Ching, the oracle facilitates the knowledge that you access by entering the subconscious. So the subconscious is a repository of knowledge, and in terms of doing oracles, it's a repository of knowledge, particularly of the future. So the oracle facilitates this knowledge, and you obtain from the oracle knowledge of the future that is presented chronologically. I think that's really how we see it.
So you're talking about accessing the subconscious. You're talking about the importance of the randomness of
Yes.
how the things come together, which immediately makes me think of synchronicity and the part that synchronicity plays in things manifesting. And I am going to give you a fine example of this. So as I said to you, I'm very new to this particular divinatory art. And it's one of the reasons why I thought I'd explore it with you and have you on the program. So I can tell you that some knowledge of this divinatory art was zero to begin with, and that I have never known anyone who has used it until yesterday. So yesterday, having worked with a client, she then emailed me to say, by the way, I've just done this using I Ching, and look what it says in relation to what came up in our session today. And of course, there it was, the mirror. But what struck me was that this is the first and only time in my life that somebody has quoted from this oracle to me. And it was the day before I was due to do an interview with you. And so this synchronous event or series of events where she's using this and it mirrors something back to her, which is very significant and incredibly pertinent, then is also mirroring something of me and what I'm doing and what I'm learning. And that seems to be how divination works right across the board. This element of synchronicity. You're talking about it being linked to the subconscious, and yet the synchronous part of it suggests that there's an interaction with something that's external as well.
Yeah.
So would you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, if you take, say, Hexagram 49, the revolution, the revolution is actually, it's about an individual who needs to totally change his or her life, his or her lifestyle. And so at a certain point, this person is ready. This person realizes that his life or her life needs to change and is not heading in the right direction. And when that point is reached, then amazingly, events in the outside world conspire to create an opening for that person to change his or her life. That's an example of synchronicity in the I Ching that we have written about in Hexagram 49. So so the interconnected, that we are all interconnected, of course we are, but very importantly, the inner world, the world of the subconscious is full of knowledge that we can access in all kinds of ways. Here, it's about accessing and using an oracle.
So I think perhaps, you know, what we're scratching around the surface here is what Jung would have called the collective unconscious, that because we are interconnected, there is a wave reaction that when we activate something.
There is some kind of common pool of knowledge that we all tap into. And that is, and I think that has something to do with that you have had this consultation with this person, and then the person did the I Ching. And of course, the I Ching told her, it roughly said the same, because it all taps into the same common pool.
Yeah,
and then therefore it is then it proves that it is not nonsense. You do a random process, a random procedure, and plop, something comes out of it that is completely true.
But of course, we're interconnected in the physical world, in the society. We have to work together. We have to help one another and so on. But the unconscious, Jung had, of course, his theory of the collective unconsciousness, but in terms of what we're talking about here with accessing the oracle, it is the personal unconsciousness. It is the knowledge, the innate knowledge of an individual. So that is not a collective pool. It is the uniqueness of a particular individual and that individual's innate knowledge that is being accessed through using the oracle. So a person who consults the I Ching Oracle will receive hexagrams that are directly related to his or her personal experience. So it's not really it's not really a collective unconsciousness in terms of what Jung was theorizing about, but it's very innate. It's innate knowledge, personal and innate knowledge. That's how we see it.
Now, the divination art that comes to mind in some respects is tarot, in terms of the randomness also, because you shuffle the cards, you shuffle the cards, you shuffle the cards, and then you see what comes through. I can see the throwing of the coins being very similar, but I find the sticks very interesting. Can you explain how the sticks work? And because I think that's interesting too.
I will try. The sticks work that you have a bundle of sticks, a bundle of 49 sticks, and you split the bundle, and then you have 2 bundles, and then you take one stick of the right hand bundle, you put it in your hand, and then you count off 4s until you end up with a remainder, and you put those between your fingers. And then you do that with the other, and you do that. And that, from the number of sticks that you have in your fingers, you count up, you arrive at a number, which you write down. And the randomness is in the splitting of the sticks. You have a bundle, you put it in front of you on the table, and it splits. And the way that splits, that is the random moment. And if you do that with the sticks, you have that to do that 3 times for each line, and for 6 lines, 18 times. That means that you have 18 random moments, and together they will determine what the hexagram will be. And with the coins, you throw the coins, and then you have a series of heads and tails that determines one line. So you throw the coins 6 times, and you have 6 random moments, and that determines which hexagram you get. So that is how the randomness works with manipulating the sticks.
Okay, so I was very interested in, so you get the numbers, and then the numbers are attached to a hexagram.
Yes, eventually. The numbers, yeah, it's all clearly described in the book. But you arrive at a line. Is it a solid line? Is it a broken line? And then you can also get, is it a solid line that is moving, which means a solid line that is changing into a broken line, or a broken line that is changing into into a solid line. And so you have 4 possibilities per line. A solid line that is static, a broken line that is static, a solid line that is moving, or a broken line that is moving. So you jot that down, and then you get the hexagram basically from the lines, and then you see every moving line is changed into its opposite, and you draw that, and then you have the hexagram that it changes into.
The thing is that the whole method for consulting the oracle simply enables you to build a hexagram, okay? But a hexagram that you receive is the detail of whatever situation you're in, which is often invaluable information. So when you receive a hexagram, you will be able to learn about the kind of situation you're in, and what challenges that might have, or how you might have to deal with that. And in which case, in the text, there is advice about how you deal with the situation you find yourself in. And then very importantly, you will have at least one more hexagram that will be describing the situation that your current situation will develop into. So at that point, you have a window into the future where you can see what will happen next in your life. That is the essence of it, really.
And if you have moving lines, then the moving lines specify specific changes in the situation.
So I think we should probably explain that a hexagram looks like a symbol, and it's made up of a number of different types of lines.
Yeah, a hexagram.
As a specific.
Yeah, sorry, a hexagram is really a diagram of a situation. It consists of 6 horizontal lines. Some of the lines can be continuous, or all of the lines can be continuous, or some of the lines can be broken. So it is a combination of broken and continuous lines, or all broken and all solid lines. It seems very abstract, but actually, when you study it, it is actually an interesting diagram of a situation, because a hexagram consists of 2 trigrams. A trigram consists of 3 horizontal lines, but each trigram is particular energy that can be found in a situation. So let's think of an example now.
Well, it's a symbol, and the thing is that each different type of line is a symbol, and the combinations thereof are.
Now, actually, you can best say, the solid line is called the yang line, and the broken line is called the yin line, but it is the trigrams that together make a hexagram. And so you have, if you have trigrams, you have 8 trigrams, because you have 8 possible combinations of these lines, and then you have 64 hexagrams, 8 times 8 combinations. A hexagram, you can probably say it's an archetypal situation. And then you arrive at the same point as tarot. If you can say the tarot major arcana, that is the archetypal situations. And maybe you can roughly compare the moving lines in each hexagram with maybe the minor arcana and the tarot, which is more situations more.
Exactly, and that's what I was getting at, that each of them is symbolic, and the way that they're laid out has specific meanings. So it's, and you were talking about archetypes, which is one of the things I found interesting also, because the language of divination is always around archetypes, whether it's astrology, whether it's tarot. It's always about archetypes. I thought that there was something else that struck me when I was reading, and that is the importance of how you frame a question. Because there is a branch of astrology, which is horary astrology, which is exactly about asking a question. And how you ask a question is very important. So tell us a little bit about that from your perspective.
I think it's important that before you ask the question, that you know as well as possible what you want to ask. You try and find out in the day-to-day reality the facts around your question. And the better you do that, the better you understand the answer that an oracle gives, because the oracle speaks, of course, in general terms, that the querent has to translate to his own situation. So you have to know the situation that you ask the question about. And also for us, we think, for I Ching to work, the question has to be relevant to your situation. It's I Ching doesn't ask, I don't believe I Ching answers questions about how the next elections will go. It can only, if it is very relevant to you, then it can answer a question about an aspect that is relevant to you. Also, the question has to be fairly exact, not in the like, should I buy a house or rent a house? Then you have to ask, should I now think about buying a house? Full stop. Then you get an answer. Most of the time, you don't need to ask anymore, should I rent a house? Because in the answer of the one question, it's implied, does buying work? And if buying doesn't work, then you can think, now maybe you know straight away it's renting, or you have to ask another question, should I rent? Or if that is also not the case, then maybe you shouldn't move at all. But it is very important that the question it's a single question, not an and or, and it is really relevant to your situation.
Yeah.
And it is not too vague, because then the oracle will answer. But if your question is off the mark, it will give an answer. But it is much more difficult to understand that. But the answer is on sich not nonsense. The answers, it will always tell you what your situation is, what is at that moment most relevant to your situation.
Yeah, that's a good point.
But it is difficult to, then sometimes it's then difficult to understand, but I always say sleep on it. Next day or the day after, the penny will drop. But the I Ching that says, what you asked about is at the moment not relevant.
Yeah, exactly.
It is about it's about this. And that's the most difficult part of oracle interpretation, I find.
Because you can think you have an important question. You ask the oracle the question, and you think, well, what is it saying? Because actually, in reality, your question wasn't really relevant or important. But what the oracle is doing is saying, look, this is what's important. Look at this. That's what happens with it.
Exactly. Yeah. I think always when we're dealing with these different forms of divination, you have to be as clear as you can in what it is that you are seeking. And the question of relevance that you mentioned is obviously very important because it cannot be trivial. So you have to have an emotional connection with what you are. So it can what you're asking. So it must not be trivial. This is not play. So it must be relevant, and it must be as clear as you know how to make it. And if you are confused, it will reflect that back to you.
Yes.
And completely.
And so
I can tell you that on our path to learn about the I Ching, because this book is the result of a 33-year empirical experiment, being our lives. And we really have had to learn how this worked. And sometimes we were ourselves confused. And then it's for the I Ching also difficult to make head or tail of it.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, of course, the original I Ching, the Chinese classic, which was compiled something like 1,000 years BC, is incredibly cryptic and incredibly difficult to understand. And you can read a line in, say, a hexagram 2, two dragons fight in the meadow. Their blood is black and yellow. And you say, wow, that's interesting, but I can't understand it.
Where are the dragons?
So we've actually experienced that line. We've had that experience with the top line of hexagram 2. So we know what's happening there. So we've written about it in the book. So the reason we could write this book is because we spent decades living through hexagrams and lines and experiencing them. And so we've been able to unravel some of the cryptic language from the original classic. And this book is the result. And it is, yeah, the art of divination is an amazing thing. People can use it to see what is going to happen in their lives. It's magical, it's amazing. And it's a tremendous guide. It will guide people through all kinds of experiences. That's how it's been for us.
And so we are the richer for having a guide such as yours to help us decipher and find our way in the world. Thank you both so much for joining me on In the Light today.
No, thank you very much.
And I will put a link to the book on the description box. I will also put a link to the interview about your charts and how well you work together on Life Astrologer. So that link will also be on the description box. And I understand you have a Facebook page, which I will also include. Thank you both very much.
Yeah, thank you very much, Anna.
Thank you very much for interviewing us. And it was also very interesting for us. It was a joy to do it.
Wonderful. And thank you all for watching.